First of all, Brian Henry, committee member with the Atlanta chapter of AES. Welcome to our Zoom program for October. Thanks very much for attending. Just one announcement that we have an annual musical composition competition. The entries are due October 30th. 31st. If you'd like to participate, there's prizes from Waves, Sonar Works, and some others. Last year, I think we had, I don't know, a good handful of entries, some great music, and we're looking forward to any additional entries this year as well. So with that, let's kick off our program tonight. We're going to talk all about vinyl. And we have our special guest, Gar Ragland from Citizen Vinyl in Asheville. The timing of our program actually is fortuitous and quite timely. So tomorrow night, the AES annual national program has a session on mastering vinyl that's being put on by a group out of Nashville. And then just today, there was an article, if anyone saw it, in the New York Times on the comeback of vinyl. I mean, what timing, right, for a program this evening on a record plant. The article was talking about how vinyl is now the most popular and highest grossing format out of all, setting aside streaming, of course. But so the first 6 months of 2021, 17 million vinyl albums were sold, total value over $500 million just in the first 6 months of 21. And if anyone's interested, you might want to pull up that article and get some of the more detail. Fascinating. So let's get on with our program. Gar,
hi.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening. Greatly appreciate it.
It's great to be here, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to your neat facility in vinyl? So start in music and...
Sure. Well, my current title, I'm the founder and the CEO of Citizen Vinyl here in Asheville. But I come to this project as a musician and as a music producer, and by extension of that, I run a small little boutique record label called New Song Recordings that I started back in 2006. So my background in music, I grew up in a musical household. Neither of my parents is a musician or an instrumentalist, but very big music fans and appreciators of music. So I grew up with parents that enjoyed buying vinyl records, and have very fond memories in the living room when my father would come home from work, and the whole family, my sister and I and my parents, spinning records in the living room and dancing, to the Bee Gees or James Taylor or Earth, Wind and Fire. And I took a very early interest in music and performance. I was active in middle school, elementary school, musicals. I was always one of those guys that was really excited when they made the announcement at school about, auditions for the upcoming, Christmas musical program that the school had, and just remember just having so much fun preparing for those music events and singing and participating in them. And then I took guitar lessons for a few years as a adolescent, and then in high school I got really into guitar and remember going out and buying tablature books, Guitar Made Easy for Crosby, Stills and Nash, or James Taylor's Greatest Hits. Definitely really gravitated towards more of the singer-songwriter repertoire that I spent a lot of time listening to as a child. Linda Ronstadt, Joni Mitchell, the Eagles were really popular in our household. So I already had that music in my ear, and just figured out how to articulate those chords that I was hearing in my head, using tablature books and learning the cowboy chords in that way. And then um, when I went to the University of Virginia as an undergrad in the late 80s through the early 90s. And I remember the first week that I arrived on campus, how excited I was to go and audition for uh, gigs at the local bars and cafes and coffee shops. So I had my first paying gig as a musician as a freshman in college, and was very active in the music scene throughout my 4 years as an undergraduate at University of Virginia, and did a lot of solo work. I started songwriting at that point, and was in two or three bands. And by the time my junior and senior year, we were working with several agencies that were booking us at fraternity parties and clubs throughout the Southeast. So I was really busy on the weekend, performing and having a blast, feeling like a rock star. And after graduating in '93, I decided I had a lot of musical momentum. I decided to stick around in Charlottesville and be a part of the music scene there. And that was the time when Dave Matthews Band was just starting to come together. Like during my college years was when Dave put the band together. I knew Dave when he was still a bartender at Miller's Jazz Club on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. For those of you that may be familiar with it, it's still there, still one of my favorite little venues, very intimate little jazz club. And while the bands that I was in never obviously assumed the level of popularity that the Dave Matthews Band did, it was a really fertile part of my music education, just being a part of that scene and watching how hard that band and their team hustled to build their fan base the old-fashioned way, in a very grassroots, one show at a time. They would take their van down to Alabama and play a fraternity party and then a club there the next night, and race back to Charlottesville, where they had a weekly residency at Trax nightclub, which no longer exists. And they started playing in front of a few people, and after a couple of years, there was a line out the door every Tuesday night. And I just learned a lot about music in that way, being a part of that scene. And then fast forward a few years after that, I decided to go back to school in music, and I moved up to Boston after I was accepted into a music program at the New England Conservatory. It's called the Contemporary Improvisation Department, and I didn't major in music as an undergrad. I was pre-med throughout college, and when it came time to study, buckle down, and prepare for the MCATs, I was too enamored with this love affair I was having with music. I didn't have the discipline to stop playing gigs. And in retrospect, that was a really great thing for me to make that decision earlier on. So I did take a lot of music classes, but I was lucky enough to get into this program, and I moved up to Boston thinking I was going to be a part of a 2-year program. And I ended up living in Boston for about 8 years, which is where I met my wife. And it's where I started my music production. I had always been interested in where sort of art meets science as a musician. And because I like science, I sort of took on my own interest in learning about signal processing and signal flow and gain structure and all the things that we as engineers and mixers do. And it was kind of a hobby in it, but it continually evolved as more and more of an interest. And by the time I was back in school in Boston, I had this whole network and community of classmates who were needing to get their senior recitals recorded, or they wanted to cut an EP of this new band and this project. So I had all this great opportunity to cut my teeth as an engineer and as a mixer and as a producer. And, that was 30 years ago. So over the last 3 decades, I have gradually my career has evolved more away from being a practicing musician and a live performer, and more into being a producer. And I still am lucky enough that I get the opportunity to exercise that creative muscle in the studio as a producer. I often work with singer-songwriters, and we'll start with a great song and a great guitar track and a great vocal, and then I have the luxury, the fun part of trying to build this whole sort of tapestry of sound to place that song within some sort of aural context and build this aesthetic from scratch. So that's the creative part of the work that I really, really enjoy the most. So
did you have, prior to Citizen Vinyl, did you have your own studio in Asheville?
Well, I did. So I after Boston, my wife and I moved to New York City. My wife is a writer and a journalist and an editor, and she was working for a magazine in Boston at the time and got a great job opportunity. She had been living before we met in Boston in New York City and knew the city really well. And when that opportunity presented itself, I'd never lived in New York. I'd always loved playing there as an artist and spending time there. And we moved to New York and lived there for 8 years. And I had a studio in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn. And I worked out of there for a number of years. We were in New York for a total of 8 years when I unexpectedly and very fortunately, I had an invitation and an opportunity to relocate here to Asheville to be a part of the community of producers and engineers and mixers at Echo Mountain Recording Studios here in Asheville, which is just a couple of blocks away from where I am right now in Citizen Vinyl, our studio here. And we can get into that a little bit later. But my wife and I had all 3 of our children in New York City, and we loved living in New York, but we knew that probably wasn't going to be our final resting place. So the timing with a growing family, and I'm a native North Carolinian. I grew up in Winston-Salem, a couple hours east of here. And as a kid growing up, I went to camp here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and I've always loved Asheville. So when this unforeseen opportunity to relocate with my family down here in the mountains of Asheville, we jumped at the opportunity. We were excited about this new change and raising our kids here in the mountains. And so I worked out of Echo Mountain for many years. I had a room there. I was technically a tenant there, but I produced a lot of records. And for those of you that are familiar with Echo Mountain Recording, maybe some of you have worked there, it is a truly phenomenal recording complex. It consists of 2 buildings. One of the rooms has a vintage Neve 8068 desk, and the other has an API legacy console that was Herb Alpert's originally. And it's rumored that Joni Mitchell's Blue was actually tracked and mixed on that, along with some Tom Petty records and lots of Cheech and Chong records too, apparently. So I had the pleasure of working out of Echo Mountain for a number of years, doing music production work and running this small record label called New Song Recordings. And it was there that I started to get the idea of opening up a vinyl pressing plant here in Asheville. So that idea started percolating about a little over 4 years ago. And I had the original idea after having some less than ideal experiences as a client of other pressing plants for my own record label needs, pressing vinyl, and appreciating at the time, even back then, there were what I considered exceedingly long turn times on vinyl orders, and just a lot of opportunities and frustrations in terms of customer service. So, having been in Asheville for a few years, when I started to think about this, and like the rest of us, I was reading mainstream media articles like that of today's New York Times, just talking about this. As early as 12 years ago is when this sort of hockey stick increase in sales of vinyl records in the industry started to happen. And with Asheville being Asheville and our love of craft, and we have a very, very vibrant homegrown community of music lovers. We've got a great community of great music venues here with the Orange Peel and Thomas Wolfe Auditorium right down the road. And the fact that Asheville receives about 12 million tourists annually. It's as most of you may be aware, Asheville has grown in popularity in the last 10 years, certainly a whole lot in the nearly 10 years that we've lived here. But knowing that Asheville is a host to culturally adventurous tourists every year, I thought, well, if there's any place that could really support a vinyl press that had some other sort of exciting elements to it, in being factory tours, and it had always been my idea about having a on-site record store. And as a music producer, it had always been my dream that wherever we ended up with Citizen Vinyl here in town, that I would have the opportunity to have carve out, a couple hundred square feet minimum to have an on-site mixing and post-production room here, like what I'm in right now. So little did I know that we would stumble upon this historic building right in the heart of downtown Asheville, and that the stars would align as amazingly and magically as they have with this project, where we now find ourselves in this historic newspaper building. And we can talk about that a little bit, Brian, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. So how did it, obviously it's quite an expensive venture to pull together. How did that element of this come together?
Well, I'm proud to say that we have all of our, we have been very successful in our fundraising. We have raised, our original business model was to raise $3 million for this project. And I started fundraising probably 2.5 years ago, starting with zero money. I didn't come to this project with, deep pockets and a trust fund that I could, invest in building this as a pet project of mine. I knew that it was going to involve a lot of community support in order to bring this project to life. And fortunately, we have been very well received. My original vision for this business and the role that it was that I intended for it to play in the community was very well received by our local community. And many of our early investors, actually, I tell people that this project would not exist were it not for the Asheville Area Arts Council, which I have been involved with for many years now. I've been on the board for, I think, 7 years, and I served as its board chair for 4 years. I recently stepped down, but it was through that role and being an arts advocate, really, as I think I became known as someone who was active in the music industry here in Asheville, but also sincerely cared about preserving this community's rich cultural integrity amidst all of these changes that Asheville has been experiencing over the last 15 years. It started before I ever arrived in town, but we have for those of you that are familiar with Asheville, we have a very rich music and cultural history of craft and the art scene, and Pinland right down the road. And And when I moved to town, I recognized that per capita we have a lot of cultural capital here, but we didn't have really a commensurate um, level of advocacy to support and to ensure the sustainability of our cultural fabric here. And it's still, I think, at risk. We have a lot of challenges now, affordable housing and keeping our creative community that actually created the Asheville that people know and love, that people from Chicago and New York and LA are now moving here, selling their $2 or $3 million apartments and moving here because they want to be a part of this vibrant culture that we have. But it's coming at a cost of displacing the very creatives who have made it as attractive. So fortunately, our early investors, it was a very easy sell. I had to paint the picture that we wanted to create a business here that not only was viable as an investment based on the market research we had done and the growth of the vinyl pressing industry, but more importantly, I think that our investors have been motivated by our sincere interest in establishing a company that has a culture and an ethos that really celebrates our history of craft and our creative community. And that's how our original business model, which was exclusively focused on manufacturing, very organically evolved in a very Asheville way to become a multi-segmented business that now features not only the vinyl pressing as the centerpiece, sort of as the core of our business model, but we now have a food and beverage segment of our business that we created in partnership with some of the A-list food, chef and beverage luminaries here in town. And we have a retail business. We have a really cool store that we call Coda, Analog Art and Sound, that features both new and used records, as well as a lot of very cool locally screen printed artwork. Much of it's sort of music themed, like limited edition concert posters or album art, that sort of thing. And we're in the process of expanding our retail offering. So the focal point of it's really about celebrating that kind of analog culture, if you will. So it's the marriage of listening to great music in an intentional listening environment paired with farm to table food and craft cocktails. And we have a beautiful vinyl themed craft cocktail bar downstairs that I can show you on our tour later on, where we play during all of our hours of operation. We play exclusively vinyl records, and it's very curated music. So we play records one side at a time. We really want to celebrate the medium of vinyl as really how effectively it promotes a body of work, not just what Spotify playlists can bounce around from one song to another. We really want to celebrate the meta level artistry that goes into creating a coherent album and a collection of songs that in their entirety tell a story in and of themselves. So I just dropped my AirPod. One sec.
Go ahead. Sure. Do you have a performance venue for folks to perform? And
we do. We have a combined shared space downstairs in the cafe space that is designed to be multi-purpose and modular in its floor plan. So our fire code occupancy is 258 people. So we can accommodate large private events. We've had some really cool DJ dance parties downstairs. We've had some live performances, and programming is a really important part of what we do here at Citizen Vinyl, and coming up with creative ways that make us unique as a destination. And the uniqueness is really driven by the intersection of the different segments of our business.
Sure.
So up here, like a perfect example would be that we record here in the studio a record that gets pressed downstairs that ends up for sale in our store. And when the band plays here at the Orange Peel, they come the day of their show, they do an in-store performance and a vinyl signing event, which we can then record and offer for pre-sale on the day of those shows to their 200 super fans that want to check out an acoustic set before their show that night, and then ship it to their fans, 4 or 5 weeks later as a collectible limited edition vinyl record. So that's really where the fun is.
Man, I'll tell you, there can't be anywhere else in the world that has all of that, right? Or I don't know, maybe there is, but
there are a few places, in full disclosure. I mean, I tell you, one of there have been multiple sources of inspiration for this project, but Third Man Records in Detroit.
Sure. Yep. Jack White. Yep.
Jack White's outfit. So when I first started thinking seriously about spearheading this project 4+ years ago, I knew that I had a lot of learning to do and education about the industry, because I really knew nothing about the vinyl industry. So at the time, I had gotten wind of the first annual Making Vinyl Conference, which is really an industry conference, fairly small. It was at the time, at least, and it was sponsored in part by Third Man Records, and as such, it was held in Detroit. So I booked a plane ticket. I registered for the conference, and I showed up with an empty notebook and some sharpened pencils just to learn and absorb as much data as I could about, market trends, and really wanted to answer that first question of how ephemeral is this vinyl thing? Is this an enduring is it survived extinction, and is it going to stick around for a long time, or is this just kind of a flash in the pan thing that's going to fizzle and burn, and everyone's going to retreat back to their digital devices and streaming services? So I went up there, and then part of the conference, Making Vinyl, included a tour of Third Man Pressing, which maybe some of you have been to, but it was arriving at the venue and walking in and seeing this sort of mixed use space. They have a performance stage. They too have a studio on site. It's heavy on the retail. They don't have a food and beverage component, but then in the back of the building, you can look through and you can see through the glass windows their pressing operation. And it was that moment that things really clicked. And I said, an idea like this, and maybe even broadened in scope, would do so well in Asheville, North Carolina. It's like the perfect host community for this. So that really was affirmation that that this idea had enough legs to move forward. So I started fundraising fairly shortly after. I worked with a fantastic, our CFO, I brought on early. I paid her out of pocket with my own money as a consultant. She comes to this project with a lot of manufacturing experience, primarily in the automotive industry, but also recently in the vinyl industry, actually. And I give her credit for being the architect of our business model. And we put a plan together, and I started pitching it to some of the patrons of the arts community here. And I think that I had some degree of credibility through my advocacy work. And that's why I say that the Arts Council is really responsible for bringing this project to life, because some of our earliest investors are fellow former board members that really care about preserving Asheville's identity as a cultural destination. And our goal with Citizen Vinyl is not only to be successful as a business, but to really function as an enduring landmark here in downtown Asheville that can help sort of reestablish our identity. I mean, nothing against, most of you probably know that Asheville has a very vibrant, very successful craft beer industry. I think we have maybe Grand Rapids, Michigan is now leading on a per capita basis, the number of breweries per capita, but it has in many ways shifted the sort of the landscape of Asheville in a way. And we feel like this is an opportunity for us to tell a bigger story about the history of music and craft in this community.
Well, I've got 100 questions, but let me turn to a particular topic that I imagine our attendees are interested in, and that's, all right, how is this doing? The record, you and I spoke in preparation for the session about the business end of pressing records in today's environment. And according to the New York Times, demand is just going through the roof, and people are waiting a very long time to get albums pressed. So why don't you tell us about, I know you started last year in the middle of COVID, which was quite a challenge, but how is it going operating a record plant in 2021?
Yeah, well, so we celebrated our 1-year anniversary on October 8th, and we opened our doors for business even before to the public, before we even had our first press on site, and we're pressing records. We didn't start pressing records due to the pandemic until December of last year.
Okay.
And I joke because our VP of operations, who is our fantastic German engineer who runs our manufacturing, and he's doing a phenomenal job. He's so good at what he does, and our manufacturing team has really quickly established a reputation as our goal was to really compete on quality and customer service and not on price. And the silver lining, despite all of the challenges of opening up during the pandemic, and we had to pivot on our business plan and develop a phased in strategy, and our fundraising slowed down for a little bit while people were trying to figure out what the future held for everyone, for society with COVID-19. Despite all of those challenges, the level of interest and the demand that we have on our pressing services has exceeded everybody's expectations. So we now have 35 people on payroll here at Citizen Vinyl.
35.
The question that Peter, our German engineer, VP of operations, had for me early on was, Gar, I love this idea. I'll take the job. I can make great records for you, but are you going to be able to go out and find customers that want to do business with us? And that was one of my biggest concerns. And the silver lining to opening up when we did in the midst of the pandemic is that we couldn't have had a more timely opportunity to enter this industry. And that is recognized by the fact that we are turning down probably twice as much business as we can accommodate given our current capacity right now. Everybody in the industry, and it's not just Citizen Vinyl. I read an industry study a couple of weeks ago where it's estimated that still, despite the onboarding of new capacity, new presses and existing pressing plants adding additional capacity, that we're still here in the US only able to meet about 50%, 50% of the demand that the industry has on it. So we are fully booked. We are, I guess our biggest challenges now are great challenges, and that these are the stuff that we're needing to place our attention and focus on. It's not business development and finding customers. It's human resources and building the infrastructure to accommodate the growth opportunities that we're able to entertain now. We are pressing records 7 days a week on our 2 machines, 12 hours a day. Our goal each month currently with our existing capacity is to press between 30 and 35,000 records a month. And we are fully booked through March of 2022. We just we're expecting the arrival of our 3rd press in January, which is going to open up a whole lot more capacity for us. And so to answer your question, our growth as a business is exceeding expectations. Now, that being said, because we're a multi-segment business, some segments of our business are growing more quickly than others. As you can imagine, our food and beverage and business, while it's doing okay, it's not.
Yeah.
The pandemic has really been the real sting. Has really been incurred. But that being said, we have some very loyal patrons of our cafe. We offer really wonderful food, and it's becoming sort of more of a destination. Word of mouth is certainly helping out a lot.
So one question on the record pressing plant. I guess I would imagine that the upkeep and maintenance of something like that would be quite a challenge. Is it, or are these machines of such quality that you don't have a whole lot of downtime in the operations?
That's a good question, Brian. It's a very mechanical process. So by design, stuff's going to wear out. We're talking about hydraulic presses that are powered by steam boilers. It's still a fairly rudimentary process. I mean, the fundamental process of making a record has not really changed all that much in the last 80 years. It's really about using temperature and pressure to press a puck of vinyl into the stampers and the sort of negative grooves of the record, and then cooling it down and then trimming it and packaging and sleeving it. So I feel strongly actually that because of Peter and his training as an engineer, we probably suffer much less downtime as a pressing plant than maybe some of our fellow pressing plants do, because Peter has an on-site metal lathe. So whereas if you broke a spindle or something on a press and you didn't have a backup, especially during the pandemic, where like many industries, there are a lot of pandemic related delays on parts and whatnot. But Peter's such an accomplished engineer that if something should break down, or when it does, that he can actually build something in his shop room off the factory floor on his metal lathe and come back and have it up and running in 15 minutes, opposed to waiting 4.5 weeks for a supplier in Canada to get it to us. So we've been really lucky in that regard.
Well, I'm sure everyone's anxious to see your facility, so I'm cognizant of the time. Do you want to start with the tour, and we'll also ask folks who have any questions to throw them on the chat, and I'll kind of monitor that. But why don't you give us a tour of the facility? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, I will transfer to my phone here in a second, but we can start the tour here where I am. This is the 3rd floor of the Citizen Vinyl building, and as luck would have it, original to this old newspaper building. In the basement, the owner of the newspaper built this building, and he put newspaper presses in the building. So for decades, the newspaper was pressed on site here in the basement. So we loved the opportunity and the idea that we would have to bring manufacturing back to downtown Asheville. And the owner of the newspaper had also recently purchased, prior to this building's being constructed in 1939, he had purchased the WWNC radio station studio, which is Asheville's radio station. And he built in this building what at the time was one of the most state-of-the-art radio station studios in the country. He modeled this studio after the RCA studios in New York City. And he felt justified in doing that because this station was one of the most popular radio stations in the country, in large part because of Asheville's elevation. It was the highest elevation radio station studio east of the Mississippi River. So it had a reach all the way from this building to West Texas and up into Canada. And in this room, we've taken over the 1,700 square feet of the radio station studio space and saved it from demolition. And the build quality of this old studio is unbelievable. I will pick up my laptop here and show you. We're now in the Studio A room, which was the original live room. So the walls here were originally plaster, and it was a much livelier sounding room than what it is today. We have the walls are now treated with acoustic fabric, behind which are located a lot of sound absorption and diffusers. These are the original light fixtures.
Wow.
Circa these beautiful Art Deco light fixtures in these sconces. And what's really cool, and I thought was really telling, is that this is the original floor. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in this room, thousands of acts, including Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys in 1939, had a residency on the station during the Melton Music Hour. And it was from this room that new bluegrass sound was first premiered to a national radio audience. So if you to talk about vibes and just like it is such a privilege to work out of this room and an honor. And it just, we've got big shoes to fill, and we're really trying to honor the history of this space in the most artful way that we can. So I continue to work on my own projects for my record label, New Song Recordings, but we also host a lot of musicians who come in here it's a fantastic sounding room. It features a Rupert Neve Designs 5088 console here. That's just a joy to work on. I've really enjoyed working with the Rupert Neve Designs team. We felt like this space and the history really deserved a really phenomenal desk to work out of. So,
and there's a video right on your website, or that they came and did about the desk.
Correct. Yeah, they did on the Rupert Neve YouTube channel. There is a fairly recent video called Citizen Vinyl and the 5088. And it features me talking about the important, not only musical and technical role that the desk plays, but the sort of the symbolic role that, we're honoring the rich legacy of Rupert Neve and his contributions to pro audio. In the same way that we're trying to honor the history of this building and the history of this community. So it's kind of it's almost a symbol of what we're trying to do here. So it fits in really nicely. I'll show you quickly before we go downstairs through the control room window. That's an ISO room there. And that functioned originally as the control room for the radio station. So all of the broadcast equipment it looked like some of the historic photos, it looks like the shuttle of a spaceship. I mean, the cockpit of a spaceship in there. And we use that as an ISO room now. And then this we call Studio B. And I can just hold on to my laptop for a minute. You guys want to see this? So I'm walking out. These are the original doors of the studio. This is this is a beautiful the building is very Art Deco, and it just architecturally, we had so much to work with in this space. So if I can find my fob, walk you here into Studio B. So this room has 17-foot high ceilings. It's a great sounding live room. Drums sound phenomenal in here. We've got a mic panel, and then we've got this little mid-century, I call it the Don Draper lounge here. So it's just it's a fun. We have a lot of team meetings here. You can see our little bar here. We host some private events. We rent it out on occasion to local nonprofit boards and that sort of thing. So it's really a beautiful space. We're quite proud of being able to utilize it.
Yeah, it's amazing that you were able to find such a place that fit so perfectly with your vision.
Well, it wasn't us. It's almost like the project found us. It's crazy about how many things have happened for the stars to align for this project to come together. So,
we lost your audio. Oh, you're going to get your phone hooked up. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm down in the main foyer here of Citizen Vinyl. This is the main entrance to to our space here on the first floor. And this is a beautiful terrazzo mural of Western North Carolina that all of our guests, again, this is all original to the space. And then you'll see here, and then you walk in, this is the original newsroom of the newspaper. And this is our cafe area.
Very nice.
So back here in the corner is our kitchen. And there's the bar here. And you can see pictures of this on our website too. We're getting ready to close.
Nice high ceilings too for
very high.
musical
Yeah.
acts.
Yeah. Yep. And then this is our store back here in this corner. This is our Coda analog art and sound. So you'll see, you guys see that?
Yep. It looks really cool.
It's really fun. So
Yeah.
it's kind of it's sort of a multi dimensional sort of experience here is what we're trying to go for. So people can come in and have a sandwich, have a espresso or a drink and do a little bit of record shopping. And then they can also come and you'll see here, all the cool sort of Art Deco stylings, the glass block wall.
Yep.
This is just it's a beautiful, we've done very little to alter or modify this. It's a really beautiful building. And then this is a glass wall that we constructed that separates our manufacturing from our more public areas. So we've got two presses here. You can see through the glass window. These are some of the examples of all the different colors of vinyl that we've pressed so far. Can you all see that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's coming through good. Mm-hmm.
And then this is the back of our fully manual press. That's called the Viral light tone machine. That was the first one that we arrived. And then this is our fully automatic press. And I will walk you into the manufacturing through this door. And now we're in the manufacturing. This is not being used right now. I think they just shut this one down. But this is our manual press here. There's the extruder that makes the hockey pucks. You put the vinyl pellets in this hopper there, and it carefully weighs 140 grams for a standard weight, and it creates right there a puck. It looks almost like a hockey puck, and then you place the puck here in the press. And these are the stampers, the metallic side A and side B here. And then this is the trimmer. And a operator works with, these are actually three machines working in concert with one another, starting with the puck, then the press, and then finally the trimmer that shaves the edge. So it's really, this press is really just a fancy waffle iron. And we've got our fully automatic one press. This is an SMT based machine that is integrated. You'll see here, I'm doing a video tour, Coach. This is Coach, one of our awesome press operators. Say hey to AES Atlanta. Yeah, we're testing a Blackberry Smoke record now.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
I just saw them a couple weeks or about a month ago here in Atlanta. So they're great.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. They're big fans of ours. We've been doing several of their projects recently. But I'll show you, the process starts here on this machine. This is the extruder. So you put the pellets, see what's in here. You guys see that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful color for this record. It's almost like a crimson. So this will create in here, you're looking at the puck's going to come out and it's going to grab these labels. That's the A side and the B side. And it's going to mash them together right there. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
And then it's going to, when the other record in front of it comes out, it's going to push that into the press itself. So watch this. Let's see. Do it right over there. And then let me know if
Yeah, we can see it.
okay, good.
So now do you guys prepare I'm forgetting the term, but the actual plaque that the record is pressed from? Do you actually do all that and have it kind of mastered there, or is that done elsewhere?
We do not. We do not. So prior to what we do here, which is press the records, and then you'll see it goes, and then the trimmer comes in here and cuts what's called the flashing. Do you see that?
Yes. Yep.
And then that creates the clean edge, and then it will, when that's finished, it'll slide it on to the spindle. And that is a freshly pressed record, my friends. Right
Very
there.
nice.
So what's cool, this is called the flashing, and this is the leftover by design, the process. And we have a grinder in the basement that regrinds that and goes right back into the hopper. So we have very little waste in the process. All of the excess, and even the records like these that don't meet our quality control, we'll cut out the center label with the drill press, and then we'll regrind all of those records that don't meet our quality control and reuse that vinyl. So it's a very efficient process. But to answer your question, Brian, before the project gets to us, two steps are. First step is the vinyl mastering, which is cutting that lacquer on a machine called a lathe, and that's called vinyl mastering. And then the second step is called the electroplating, or making the stampers. So that lacquer is quickly converted into a metallic negative, if you will, of that. And then that's what we receive from. We work with a number of different vinyl mastering engineers and electroplating facilities to provide us with the stampers that we need. And the stampers are really metallic negatives of the record. And you put the stampers in the machine. Here, we'll go back to this guy here. This has a stamper. I'm wondering if we have an old stamper that I could show you. It's a thin, it's made of nickel. And one pair of stampers is needed for a record. A side A has a stamper, and a side B has one. And they're typically good for about 1,000 records before you need to replace them.
Wow.
Yeah. So we sub that part out. Got it.
And those are produced one at a time, just like we saw there with the machine. And now the vinyl itself, right? It's one at a time. Yeah. But it comes off there's probably about on the automatic press, we've got a 35 to a 40-second cycle time for a record. So we try to make with the automatic press. Our goal is to hit about 1,000 records a day for an approximate 8-hour shift is what we're going for here. And then, so what we do is we also sub out the printing of the packaging, the jackets and the sleeves. We don't do that here on site. But to our customers, we're really a soup to nuts operation. So if you're an independent artist, you can go to our website. You can upload your WAV file masters and print quality PDFs of the artwork that you want for your jacket and your sleeve. And then we'll take it from there. We'll project manage it. We'll sub it out to, and so as far as our artists are concerned, they can give us the sort of source material, and they'll end up with a packaged
box of records that will be shipped to wherever they want them shipped.
So how do you know when that record comes off of the machine? How do you know that it's good, it works, it's not going to skip? Like your quality control, I guess, is just great confidence that the process works.
There is. So I think confidence is one thing, but we also pull records out of production, every maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And we have a quality control room off of the manufacturing floor that has a turntable, and we have a computer, and we actually have some proprietary software that will compare. It will sample the audio coming off of the record. It'll import it into the computer, into the software, and it will compare it to the source WAV file, the digital information.
Right.
So we pride ourselves on having really good quality control, and then also just like having operators who have good ears, and we require them to occasionally pull a record off and put it on the turntable and listen to it. We have noise canceling headphones that they can listen to while they're actually pressing. They can listen to wirelessly. They can listen to the record. And but to your point, it is I think the allure and the challenge of vinyl as a physical format is that there are things that can go wrong. It is a physical, mechanical process. So just because it's on a record, I think there's a myth out there that just because it's on vinyl, it sounds good. Well, the truth is that not all vinyl sounds good. You can have great sounding. If you're listening to a really well mastered and a well cut record, it sounds like nothing else. It sounds it just has the warmth and all of the analog mojo that comes along with it. But if it's a poorly made record, you're going to have to suffer through a lot of surface noise, and maybe the record wasn't mastered ideally for vinyl. There's certain things that you need to do, like you need to sum low frequencies to mono below a certain frequency that you don't have to think about for digital. So there are things that can go awry, absolutely, and they're problems. And before we press a project, we send what's called test pressings to every client, and they have to be approved before we move into mass production.
Got it.
So the likelihood of there being an issue sonically, it's going to be identified during the test pressing, meaning that it's a bad stamper or it was a bad lacquer cut.
Okay.
We can pinpoint that early on in the process and identify that on the test pressings. So we'll press usually 5 records that's included in every project we do, and we'll send it to multiple locations, to the producer, to the vinyl mastering engineer, to the artist, to the manager, whoever wants it. And they have to sign off on it before we green light the mass production of the records. And at that point, it's pretty safe to say that you're like 90% of the way towards that confidence level of knowing that you're pressing, that you're working with a good set of stampers, and that if there's any issues after that part, it's really human error on our part.
Got it.
So
if for some of our attendees here, just ballpark, if somebody wants to come in as an artist and get 1,000 albums made, what's the ballpark cost? Just an idea of like how expensive is it to get a vinyl record made in 2021?
Well, I can tell you that I'll use a different quantity just because I'm more familiar with it. So the entry level into vinyl, let me get out of the hallway. It's a little reverby in there, maybe difficult to hear me. So if I'm an independent artist and I need to know what is the minimum amount of money that I need to pay to get into the vinyl, to have a vinyl product that I can sell on my website and on Bandcamp and at my shows, typically it's about $2,200 to $2,300 for 300 units, 300 records. And I'll say that about $1,000 of that is a fixed cost, whether you're getting 300 records made or 3,000 records made, because that $1,000 will go towards cutting the lacquers, getting it mastered, cutting the lacquers, and getting the stampers, right? And then
Right.
a lot of the cost is in the packaging. So the price per unit drops pretty quickly once you increase the quantity from
It's still
300.
not, it's still not bad. I mean, it's $6, $7, $8, I guess, ballpark.
Yeah. And it's not bad. And I do a lot of artist development work. I work with a lot of independent artists who are migrating from the traditional 1,000 CDs, is that what they'll get made at disc makers or something,
right,
when they release a record. And it's a lot less expensive to get CDs made than it is to make records, but the margins on records are much better. So whereas you can sell a CD on if you're playing clubs and coffee houses for maybe 10 or 15 bucks for an EP, you can sell that same body of work on a vinyl record for $25 to $40, depending on how elaborate the packaging is. So the margins, so you're spending more money up front, but you can be much more profitable in the long run on a per unit basis. So it's a very artist friendly investment for artists to make, because they can, it's just, as we all know, records are there's a collectible element, there's a visual and tactile element that is as attractive to purchasers as the music on the record itself, I would argue.
Yeah. That's great. Well, let me open up the floor here. Do any of our attendees have any questions? I think we've been pretty comprehensive here today, Gar.
Good.
I'm not seeing any. So I think, this has been fantastic. This has just been super tour. I think we've learned a ton this evening. And we do have a question here. Do you ever master from purely analog sources?
That certainly can be done. I mean, you can have a record that is that exists in the analog domain throughout the entire manufacturing process. And an example of that would be a record that is recorded to tape to 2-inch machine. Let's say it's a multi-track record,
right,
and then it's printed to a 2-track 1/4-inch tape. That's what the final mix is, and then it can be mastered. And yes, mastering engineers can cut the lacquer straight from analog. It's really the exception rather than the norm, just because of the expense and the additional time and labor required of that. I would say that most records are the source material for us are digital WAV files, but they're high resolution. These are 24-bit, 96K and above source material. But more often than not, like I know Sterling Sound in Nashville, a great mastering house, they do a lot of cuts for vinyl from the master tapes of some of these, like of the reissues of the classics. So they'll do cuts for Led Zeppelin using the original tapes, or so that can be done, but it's typically rare to do a completely analog, but it's certainly possible, but it's just not within most artists' means to do that.
Well, we have another question here, Bob. He's got his hand up. Bob, did you intend to ask a question? Your mic is on mute if you're. He may have accidentally hit his hand there. So,
Oh, I see. So, but I see something here. I'm curious. When you're impressive to the public, I remember seeing an early CD pressing plant at Virgin Record Store in Times Square. Huh. I'm not sure what the question is, Bob.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
yeah, now we
Yeah,
can.
yeah,
Yes.
great.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
That was I can't. I was trying to type real fast. If and when is it open to the public? And
Oh, yeah.
when? In other words, you have a venue there.
Oh yeah, we're open. We're open Wednesdays through Sundays, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And we serve wonderful farm to table food here in our cafe we call Session, and that's our store is open from 9 to 9 every day but Monday and Tuesday. Those are the 2 days of the week that we're closed. Yep. So we've been open since October of last year. So come by and visit us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you? Is the room we saw, is that a clean room or not? Just curious.
I am not sure how, like what you would mean by clean, like requiring sort of hair nets and that sort of thing.
Yeah, clothing and foot coverings and all that kind of stuff.
No,
you have to worry about the floor getting dirty. Okay.
You don't have to. I mean, we keep it very clean, but we don't require our pressing staff to wear, hoods and it's not really a concern. It doesn't interfere with the process. It's not going to taint the quality of the records. So no, we don't require that of our press operators or packagers.
Thank you very much. This is one of the most impressive presentations I've ever seen. Really, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Great.
All right. Any other questions? This is your chance to learn, ask anything about the current world of vinyl. I love all the different colors. So those are just different pellets that you get, I presume.
Yep. And I was
just
correct. So the standard color is black. And that was really the only color for decades.
Yeah,
I would say of all the advances in the technology surrounding vinyl pressing, it's the polymers used for the non-black colors that has really advanced a lot. Because back in the early days of colored vinyl, there were a lot of issues because the properties of that colored vinyl wasn't as desirable as the black. And the black has historically been the color of choice because it has a lot of carbon in it. And because it has a lot of carbon, it's a less electrostatic material, which means it's not going to harbor electrical charge that will manifest itself through pops and clicks when the needle's passing through it. You'll hear a lot of that is often just due to the fact that your record's holding a charge that you're hearing sonically being discharged. There's a lot more of that in colored vinyl, but there have been a lot of scientific advances in the polymers that they use to, I mean, it's actually quite a challenge to make a clear record like this that sounds really good. It's so that's where a lot of the technological advances have come in the industry.
Got it. So now one final question from me. When you've wrapped up whatever, 3,000 LP run, are those just sent off to the artist or there to distribution houses? I guess it could vary depending on and internationally even, right? I mean, you were mentioning you got international distribution.
We ship internationally. We ship a lot to distributors straight here from, we'll load up a pallet and have it picked up and taken to one of several different distributors in the country. One of the larger ones is right here in North Carolina in the Chapel Hill area called Red Eye Distribution. They represent about 40 independent record labels here in the US, and
Wow.
they have global distribution. So from there, they can actually send it to Europe, Scandinavia, Asia. They have an office in Tokyo. But, you know, I would say that that's one extreme. And then also we've got independent artists coming in their Subaru hatchbacks, and you know, we'll load up a dolly and take their 300 records and help them put it in their hatchback, and they're on their way, and they'll sell them from the stage. They'll sell them, you know, on their own websites.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, we don't want to hold you any more. It's late. So Gar, thank you for this excellent presentation. I agree with Bob. This was just fascinating, and just a really neat insight into something that I think probably most of us never thought would be back in HUD again with vinyl. So it's just great to see. It really is.
Well, thanks so much, Brian, for having me.
Sure.
And I want to invite all of you guys to, if you're looking for a good excuse to come to Asheville, I'm guessing most of you are in the Atlanta area, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So we're only a few hour drive, and we'd love to see you here.
That'd be great.
At Citizen Vinyl. Come say hello if you see us poking around.
Absolutely. All right. Well, good night, and thanks again, Gar.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay,
It's been a
thank
pleasure,
you.
Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.